a warning sign for me from Haley when I was there for the circus, like in October when her little surge was starting. I went to one of our events and several people recognized me. And I was like, not a good sign for you, Nikki. That these are the types of people that are showing up to your events, right?
That watch a lot of MSNBC.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I wasn't getting clocked at the Ron DeSantis events.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Focus Group podcast. I'm Sarah Longwell, publisher of the Bulwark, and this week we're taking you to New Hampshire ahead of the presidential primary this coming Tuesday. Now, with Donald Trump winning Iowa by around 30 points and Ron DeSantis finishing a distant second, Nikki Haley is really on the ropes. But New Hampshire holds her last glimmer of hope. In the latest Real Clear Politics average, she is down, wait for it, only 13 points. We saw some Democrats crossing over for Nikki in Iowa, but New Hampshire is one of the only places where it's really an ingrained part of the political culture for independents to cast strategic votes in primaries. And in 2024, that means a lot of moderate or left-leaning folks are pulling Republican ballots. And that's mostly who you're going to hear from today, because there have been some recent polls that show Nikki Haley closing in on Donald Trump in the Granite State. My guest today is my dear friend and colleague at the Bulwark, Tim Miller, who spent his share of days traipsing through the snows of New Hampshire in January on the Republican campaigns of Jon Huntsman and Jeb Bush. Tim, thank you so much for being here, my friend.
I had a house in Manchester, even, for about 3 months. So
I was
a local at Republic. Unfortunately, they've closed down Republic. It was my favorite restaurant. They'd always give me a hug when I came in. I ate there every day. And so I know my New Hampshire. I know my Granite Staters. And I do have to tell you that this podcast is usually depressing. And I got to listen to these people on the plane last night, and they are my people. You know, the people we're focus grouping right now. I kept being like, you go, girl. Like, yes, like everything they said, I was vibing with. So that's positive.
So you can thank Connor for not adding into your bio the losing, hopeless campaigns of Jon Huntsman and Jeb Bush. And
we had hope. Losing losing campaigns that had very little hope, maybe.
So do you feel like, do you understand Nikki and Ron right now? Like, forget them, like the individual candidates, but what about the people working for them? Like, are they just high? Like, I was reading an article this morning about Ron's staff telling him not to get out. You know, this guy's got to keep going. Like, what is going through their minds right now? Is because Nikki, she finished behind Ron by like a point and a half. It wasn't like a particularly, they basically tied. If it had been a little less cold, some of the, people who they might have turned out a little more for Nikki because she had low enthusiasm, but had been out polling him. So anyway, what do you think? What do you think might is going through the minds of the staff?
Yeah, I was always the rain cloud on the staff, trying to talk my candidate into coming to terms with defeat. I've written many concession speeches. And so, kind of doing the casual, you might want to give this a read, kind of meeting, waiting till the candidate's in a good mood before handing them the first draft of the concession speech. It's hard for me to get in the head of the DeSantis people that want to continue on the death march. But on the Haley side, it is easy to talk yourself into outside chances hope when you're on a campaign, right? It just is for two reasons. One, you're around people that give you hope. Just
Sure.
Anecdotally, right? Like in your bubble, it's your donors, it's your supporters, it's your friends. In a state like New Hampshire, it's so small, they really know these candidates. So, Nikki's walking down the street and people are being like, go girl, go Nikki, and so you can talk yourself into the fact that you have momentum based on anecdotes and the people around you. And then secondly, it's just like human nature to be able to, ending a campaign is the end. Talking yourself into outside chances, bank shots, that's just human nature, right? Like I want to give myself a chance. I want to keep hope alive, right? And particularly in this case, when you have a front runner that like has court dates every week, it becomes, I think, easier to talk yourself into that. So I think that's the Nikki people. It's a whirlwind. You land in New Hampshire, like it's more media than you'll ever get in your life. cameras in your face everywhere, Dutch journalists, people from all, right, you have people from all the world, your media requests, you can do media all day if you want. So that element is kind of exciting too. You have the buzz of that.
So, what was interesting to me about the sort of DeSantis mentality of going, like, he's skipping New Hampshire, okay? And he thinks he's going to make a stand in South Carolina. And he thinks what's going to happen is that Trump's going to beat Nikki like a drum in New Hampshire, the one place where she looks like she could really sort of maybe beat Trump or come in really close to him. DeSantis thinks that when Trump trances Nikki drops out before getting humiliated in her home state, and it becomes the two-man race that Ron DeSantis has always wanted. So New Hampshire's do or die for Nikki, or that's one way to look at it, or who cares? They're all losing to Trump by 30 points. So to what extent do you think New Hampshire matters at this point, coming off of a 30-point win for Trump and Iowa?
Yeah, I'm in the who cares camp just for the reason of, who cares is maybe overstated, but I'm in the camp that I don't think it really matters because, the one thing that Trump has right, and Trump as people have right, as they're attacking Nikki for trying to bring in these Democrats and undeclared voters into the process, is that that is unique about New Hampshire, right? And so winning New Hampshire or doing well in New Hampshire on the back of a surge in these voters that we're listening to today, undeclared voters, I think that could be meaningful and just in the way of it extends the timeline of the primary. Maybe there's a dent in the Trump invincibility element. I just think it'd be better for society and my mental health if Trump won 49 states instead of 50. So there are ancillary things, but when it comes to actually being the nominee, winning with these voters is not the path to being the nominee, because there aren't a lot of these voters that we're hearing from today in these states. And you get to Super Tuesday, you get down here to Louisiana, there aren't a lot of people that sound like the folks in this group, and the folks in this group would just be Democrats in Louisiana, right? And so
Yes.
That's kind of the problem, right? And so I think that it's interesting. It could be meaningful in a bank shot way, but these folks are not the path. Nikki Haley winning on the backs of these folks doesn't say a whole lot about where the actual primary is going to go.
Yeah. I mean, so New Hampshire voters are really important. They know it. And so, as you alluded, we actually fielded a group of 2020 Joe Biden voters who are open to voting in the GOP primary. So they're thinking about turning out for a candidate like a Nikki or Chris Christie. And so that means they are either registered as Republicans or undeclared. And a lot of these voters were undeclared, but they were also super engaged and they knew how much their votes mattered. So let's listen to how they think about voting in Republican primaries.
I'm totally planning on pulling a Republican ballot because it's a vote against Trump. So if we can get another candidate that's not Trump, then we'll see what happens.
So I've always kind of flipped back and forth, but the last couple times I didn't think voting in the Democratic ballot would make a difference. So that's why I picked Republican. I was hoping enough independents hopefully vote for Chris Christie and can get that win over the other option.
Although I've leaned heavily Democrat over my whole lifetime, I've almost always voted Democrat. I've been a registered independent because it's the only way to play ball in New Hampshire. I probably will pull a Republican ballot. My intention is strictly to vote against Trump. And I'm on a flip of the coin right now between Chris Christie, who I like, and Nikki Haley, who I don't like, but I think has a chance to upset Trump. And it was even last night on MSNBC, they were talking, David Plouffe, who used to work for Obama, was talking, if anybody in the open vote states for the primaries, they should consider voting for Nikki Haley.
I actually think I was on with Plouffe for this one.
This is another example. We're not going to run into too many states after this where you hear focus group participants talking about what David Plouffe was saying and just being on a name basis with David Plouffe, not having to clarify who they were talking about, assuming everybody knows.
Yeah. So here's what we did. So, we did this group week or so. We did it before Christie dropped out. And so Connor, our producer, went back to all of these participants, right, after Christie dropped out, to see how they're thinking about things now. And the first woman in that set said she was leaning toward Nikki Haley already. The second woman is leaning toward pulling a Democratic ballot instead. But the last guy, that MSNBC viewer who usually votes for Democrats, is leaning towards Haley. So, I think it is funny that there's this like MSNBC viewers who are agonizing about their support of a Republican, like who they're going to support in the Republican primary. And like you said, those kinds of people are in very short supply, which is the reason that while you and I have disagreed in our predictions, whereas I think Nikki could win New Hampshire, you think don't think so. And I'm moving more to your camp every day. I let the hopium run away with me sometimes.
Yeah, that's all right.
But where we agree is that this was always Nikki's last stand, because it is so unique in New Hampshire. It's just the idea that these voters understand in ways, even other voters in open primary states don't think about this the way New Hampshire voters think about this, right? Like there's not other primary states where people are going to be like, I'm going to go pull the Republican ballot. I'm going to make a real stand for Nikki Haley because I'm going to vote against Trump. Right? Like this is
not at
totally
scale. New Hampshire is so different, and New Hampshire is so different than Iowa, even in this regard. I've always been a New Hampshire partisan, having spent a lot of time in both states. Of course, there are certain people in Iowa that take the process seriously, and on balance, the average Iowa person is probably more in tune than the average Kansas person or whatever because of the nature of the caucus. But like New Hampshire really is a different element where you just anecdotally are constantly meeting people when you're campaigning there on the streets and in coffee shops that know a lot about politics and are the questions are very engaged and nuanced. And you run into guys like this who know the staffers of the candidate, right? And so I think that there is something special about New Hampshire. I think it's just small enough and high education enough, to be honest. There's just something, and there's something in the water. I think there's a little more pride about the status. That you do run into a lot of people who are very strategic about their voting, and there are going to be some of those political hobbyists in every state, but it really feels like the one state where that happens at scale.
What else is you've been in these games like McCain, Huntsman, they did well there as well. Mm-hmm. What is it about New Hampshire that lets these moderate Republicans? I mean, literally every other state wants you to be as MAGA as possible. But this New Hampshire thing's creating this weird illusion. No, the party might be normal again. But these guys, the more moderate cans have always done well there. What is it about New Hampshire voters that makes that happen?
Yeah. Some of it's just the demographics, right? It's just higher education, pretty white state. Some of it is the nature of, when you think about New Hampshire, I don't know that a lot of people think about the fact that southern New Hampshire is really a Boston suburb. So right. And that's a big part of the state. Again, it's a small state, right? So if you have the area kind of south of Manchester to the Massachusetts border, a lot of those people, again, in the pre-COVID days, at least, were commuting into Boston, right? And and so you have a big Boston suburban group, which is naturally going to fit this kind of moderate Republican element. Then you just kind of have the kind of out of date now, crotchety northeastern, kind of flinty northeastern, contrarian, libertarian-ish person. This is why Vermont, even next door, still has a Republican governor, Phil Scott. It's a super moderate governor. So there, that, what's the word I would use? Just that muscle has been exercised in a way that it's not in other states, right? Charlie Baker, Chris Anunu, these people exist there. And so they've been able to build supporters that have stayed within the party. Again, if these people lived in New Orleans, they would just be Democrats, right? And so that there's been a grassroots kind of element to that. And then just this undeclared open thing. Again, I think that there's a category of people that just, because New Hampshire is so important and they have so much pride in their status, that there are a lot of people that kind of do this every time. They're we're undeclared, we're going to read everything, and we're going to decide which side to go for. And so I think that all three of those elements combined is sort of what makes it a very unique situation.
Yeah, I love these people. So, what was interesting to me about this group is, right, because they are not Republicans at all, they're really into Chris Christie. And actually, because he was still in the race, and they liked him because he's lighting up Trump. And so these actually aren't, Nikki's a deviation over from Christie, where she's trying to doesn't want to insult Trump because she kind of wants voters that are move on from Trump, but still like Trump. And so she's got this weird line to walk to catch these people too, the ones who really hate Trump and want to see him get lit up. So the people in our focus group were considering her, but they also had like real misgivings about her. And so let's listen to some of the sound where I think they're going to talk about Nikki and even Christie, and then I'll talk a little bit about how they're thinking about their choices now.
I believe it was early 2010s. She had actually sponsored a bill that talked about life beginning at fertilization. So for me, no matter what politicians say or don't say on the way to trying to get their candidacy, it's more about their past history. So for me, she's been anti-abortion kind of all along, and she's just changing her tune to try and get the vote.
You know, I'm reconsidering now because of her pro-life stance, because I am pro-choice, and that's an important issue to me. But, you know, once again, I think it's going to fall to who do I want other than Trump? I mean, Chris Christie, yes. Nikki Haley, I think that she may have more leverage right now, might have a better position. So to me, it's going to be whoever can unseat Trump. That's who I'm going to vote for.
Where I like Christie, I don't like Haley. And I don't really dislike Haley. I guess I don't trust her. I don't think she's brave enough or strong enough to do what's right. But I think she probably would like to do what's right, but she's not big enough to fight the political pull of what people would want her to do. And
yeah, I was going to say at the first debate, she came out saying that we had to find a consensus and we had to work together. I think she said she was pro-life, but that's not what the people want. And it gave me hope that there was a voice of reason in the room, because the rest of them, except for Christie, were all, you know, just hating this group, this group, this group, and this group, and pro-life, and yeah. And then she came off, and I said, well, wow, maybe there's something to her. And so then as I watched her and as time went on, that's when I decided I didn't fully trust her.
Okay, I just want to say, in those clips were the sentiments that you hear over and over and over again from focus groups about Nikki Haley. I don't trust her is one. They always say this, although these voters don't trust her sort of from the left-wing side, but a lot of Republican voters say this about Nikki, where they don't trust her to be MAGA enough. They also talk about her being weak, which comes up all the time. I don't know if that's code for woman or what, but the weak thing comes up all the time. And then the other thing is I don't hate her, which is like this damning with faint praise that voters do. It's like, I don't not like her. I mean, you just hear people say that all the time, which is, it's just an expression of their complete ambivalence about her. And so I wonder, if Nikki Haley somehow wins New Hampshire, it's going to be with a lot of people that are really not sold on her. But what strikes me is that she actually doesn't seem like a natural fit for New Hampshire, right? Like, not the way that McCain would have been, or Huntsman with the street talk. Like, that's New Hampshire. Her word salading, equivocating, not being able to say slavery. She doesn't feel like she's in step with New Hampshire even.
Yeah. So answering that part, then I want to get to the strength thing too, really quick. But Marco, right, is her, I think is the closest analog to her. There's some differences, but so he gets crushed by Christie in that debate. So part of this is related to that. But he ends up at 10.5% last time in New Hampshire, 5th place. So I just think that is some data evidence that like this model is not a great fit for New Hampshire. Right? And I think that's right. I think that she is right now riding on the fact that the state is anti-Trump. Right. Like that there's enough anti-Trump people that there's some people that are going with her that she wouldn't have been their first choice. Right. And I think that she's kind of combining those with some folks that do genuinely like her. And so I think that's one element. But the interesting question is, how does she excite these people? Right? Like, for her to actually win, for your pony scenario to turn out, she's going to have to change the demo of the electorate to make it more undeclared, like have a greater percentage of this group turn out. And that's the thing, that's what I keep coming back to, and I just kind of don't see it. Because it's just, I was listening to this group, some of these people are going to vote for they just aren't that excited about her. Abortion comes up a lot. I loved the one woman. I do think sometimes in Republican groups, the not being strong is code from woman. But in this group, it was an older woman who was like, she's not strong enough, but she was talking about standing up to Trump, right? That I just think that she's too morally, she's too weak of a person to kind of say and do the right thing. And so it's like, was there a way to kind of create a Christie Haley hybrid that got enough of the Republican, the Whit Ayers maybe Trump crowd, and also excited? Maybe this is a white whale, enough of the undeclared. I don't know, but I think that's going to be a problem for her. Is that I don't know that she's going to excite these independent people enough. Maybe she gets enough of them just because they want to be part of the process. There's no democratic process. There's nobody, she's like the best of bad options kind of situation, but that's usually not a path to like changing the makeup of an electorate, that you're just banking on people, voting for you because you're the least bad option available.
Yeah. The thing I always think about with Nikki is like, she's very polished in her way. Like I've heard people say like, she's a good politician. She's good out there on the stump. And for the voters talk about, so she's very put together. She seems nice. And I think that's fine. Like that can get you a little way when they're like, well, kind of looks the part. And it's nice that she's a woman. Like there's sort of some of that makes her stand out. But at the end of the day, her inability, you listen to them. Like they checked her out on abortion and they're like, she's all over the place. Her inability to kind of stand in front of people and be like, this is who I am. No apologies. Like so many of her lines are canned. She does them over and over. She's, not always so quick with like a really good answer. She sounds very practiced. And so one of the things people say about her, just a little bit of a death knell now in politics, is that she seems like a regular politician. Right? She's just very, in a different era, that polish would have helped her. And I think now it seems inauthentic.
Yeah, and I don't know if it ever would have helped her in New Hampshire. And the only example of a Haley-ish candidate to win modern New Hampshire would have been Mitt in 12, but he's the neighboring state governor. So it's like a home state. I mean, most of these people all knew him from TV, from local news, right? So besides him, it's McCain, it's Trump. Like that, those are the types of folks that did well.
Yeah, this is every media buyer knows this, that you've got to, if you want to run ads in New Hampshire, you got to buy part of the Boston market. It makes it so expensive to like play in New Hampshire. So let me just ask you think she makes it to South Carolina?
I keep going back and forth, and part of it is I want her to for the content. And so I kind of think so. And just because of the rationalization elements at the start of this, it's like, there's the delegate element. There's all these things you can think of in your head. Like, what if Trump was the only case for not going to South Carolina is if she actually wants to be Trump's VP. And it's unclear to me if the VP thing is just the fact that is just part of her caution, what we're talking about. Like she doesn't want to make anybody mad. And so she's not answering that question because she doesn't want to make anybody mad. And she doesn't want any Trump voters to think that she wouldn't, or if she really is kind of eyeing it. Right. And that would be the argument for getting out, right. Is to do well, but not win, and to try to cut a deal. But if not, if she doesn't want that, I don't know. I think that she might want to see it through. What do you think?
Yeah.
It's tough.
I don't know. It's a tough call. I tend to believe just that humans don't, or the human politicians, but like they don't like to get crushed in their home state, right? That feels awfully bad. And so, and I am not a believer, as our good friend JV Last is, that like Nikki is a viable VP choice. There are plenty of boot-licking succubi available who have never crossed him in ways Nikki has, and who are, read plenty establishment-ish while still being full MAGA and loyal to him. So like, I don't know why Nikki gets him something unique that like Elise Stefanik doesn't get him. And so I don't see her as having a big bargaining chip. And I do think it depends. Like, I think if she wins or she comes in super close, I also wonder, at this point, it's getting pretty vicious between her and DeSantis. I don't know, living down there together in the 20s. And it does seem like they kind of want to kill each other now. So maybe she wants to stand and at least beat DeSantis. I have no idea. It's tough. All right.
I mean,
so
John Kasich, you got to remember, John Kasich stayed in the 2016 race forever.
Ohio.
Forever.
Yeah.
And so who the hell knows?
And this is where, with JBL and I would also, to invoke him too much while he's not here, but he kind of had this DeSantis is going to drop out before Iowa. And I was like, no, because he's got too much money. And I think DeSantis, they got to be low on funds, at this point, but Nikki's got this big infusion of cash that just came in. And so she might be able to afford to ride it for a little while. Right. And so maybe she wants to just outlast DeSantis. It seems like there might be value in being the last person standing against Trump.
My one other thing on this to consider, sometimes you have to just, consider basic human elements. My friends that are not in Nikki's current world, but had used to be in Nikki world, they're like, she's bored. She likes the limelight. She likes the attention, right? So where you might think that human nature might say, oh, you don't want a month of punishment and pain. The other side of it might be that she doesn't mind the punishment and pain. People are talking about her, and it's better than going home to wherever Sullivan's Island and just and being on Zooms.
Yeah, man. It's either it's run for something or mow the lawn,
Yeah, right.
And for a certain kind of person, that you might as well just kill them. I think Chris Christie is like that. Chris Christie had that part in his book about how you leave the governor's mansion and you go home and the phone's not ringing and Secret Service walks away and just being alone with your own thoughts makes you want to go mad. Right. And I think that for a lot of these people who run, that's probably true. So I could definitely see that. I do want to turn, now that we've invoked DeSantis's name, so I want to turn to a group of 2-time Trump voters that we also did in New Hampshire. And we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the third guy still in the race, Ron DeSantis. He's currently mired in the single digits in New Hampshire. I think he's at 5%. And one participant we had very succinctly explained why. Let's listen.
I just feel like he has a punchable face, and I just don't like him. Straight up. Yeah.
They're all politicians, and therefore, to me, I don't want nothing to do with them. Regardless of party or whatever they say, I'm all set.
I view him as a career politician, and I think that's why I wouldn't vote for him. I'd rather have somebody that I think would do okay as a politician, but also shows other traits other than just pleasing or saying the things that the people want to hear. And that's how I feel about DeSantis.
Oh, I loved it when he sent the immigrants up to Massachusetts. Kiss the ground. I thought that was beautiful. And that's what they deserve, too, because they have taken in so many immigrants. It's just overdone, and it needs to be slowed down or stopped and the wall built.
Those are 2-time Trump voters. So I will say, when I did the 2-time Trump voting group, I was like, even in good old New Hampshire, a lot of people love Trump. There's a reason why there's some chance for Nikki, but the chance of him getting 50% here, also pretty good. And they really hate DeSantis. It's there's Trumpers, and then there's this other part of undeclared, right-leaning independent, soft GOP moderates who kind of like Christie and Nikki, but there's no lane for DeSantis in New Hampshire for some reason. Why is that?
Yeah, well, I focused in the last question on the demo of the New Hampshireites that the Huntsman types could get. But there is another part of New Hampshire, right? New Hampshire has a big blue collar kind of element to it, right? And in the same way that Trump, if you kind of look at that map from 2016 of where Trump, did a lot better than previous Republicans, it's that Appalachia, all the way through then the industrial Midwest, but then it goes all the way up through Maine, right? It's and then northern New York, where Stefanik is, right? It's that type of person, more of a blue collar, maybe a former Democrat, maybe an independent Perot voter. Buchanan did very well in New Hampshire, right? So these two, in this one tiny little state, these two things do exist together, right? The more erudite, waspy moderates, and you're more blue collar. I'm not going to do any voice work here, but the kind of voice I'm talking about of the New Englander that is going to appeal to Trump. And Trump had huge rallies there in New Hampshire and won kind of overwhelmingly in the state. So that does leave just DeSantis in this real sour spot. And the other thing that it does continue to support listening to those voices is my idea that he just centers his entire campaign around the immigrant trafficking and like built a statue of himself trafficking immigrants in each of the 3 or early states, it would have been a better use of money than the actual ads that he ran, because that was the one thing these people did like about him. Sad,
Yeah,
but true.
It is sad. We did a Nikki episode the last time you were on with me. And remember what one of the headlines of it was, is that people didn't want to vote for a woman.
Oh yeah.
And so like there was like 1 or 2 people that said that. Listen to this 2-time Trump focus group. And when we asked about how they would feel voting for a woman.
Don't like take this the wrong way, guys, so just be prepared. Don't like want to kill me after. But I don't feel as though a woman belongs in the presidential seat. And I say that only because the other women in here hopefully can relate, but we think with our heart mostly over mind. And that's not what we need right now. We need somebody like Trump.
A man's job, no offense to any women out there. I just feel like it's a man's job. They're going to make tough decisions that can't have any emotions involved. They're the commander-in-chief. They have that red button at their disposal at all times. I just kind of feel like it would be better in a guy's hand, the suitcase, the metal suitcase to go into the world. When I'm having a bad day or that time of the month or whatever. So it's just, I don't know. It's just kind of how I feel.
I think a woman does have a chance right now because diversity and all that stuff. I don't think she's going to follow what she's talking about. I think we're getting a partial smokescreen from her. I don't fully trust her. She's telling us all what we want to hear, but what is she actually going to do? I'll stick with Trump so far. I don't trust a woman.
Gotcha.
I did like her for a long time, and it was a toss between her. And then when I started seeing the commercials on the gas tax, I was questioning, what else would she do that, she wasn't ever going to raise tax, and what else would she change her mind on?
That was probably, we've had lots of people say things like this in the groups. This is the first one where someone's been like, but maybe she's on her period. And then what happened? And also just like all the women in the group were like, yeah, you can't do it. You can't elect a woman.
Because who's totally rational and never makes any decisions based on emotion? Donald Trump. That guy is he is a steel box. His brain, it's always, all his decisions are based on whatever, he's like a technocrat almost. He's just a slave to the data. Never makes an emotional call at all. Like, what the, I hate, this is where, it's just like, I want to like people. That makes it really hard. Time of the month makes it really hard.
Those are tough ones. I gotta say, it's funny. In the other group, the Biden voters who were going to go pull a ballot to stop Trump, you say they make you feel good about the work, because they were talking about like, look, I don't like all the hate injected into this. But one of them said, it was sweet. But there was one of them said, like, I don't think this country is ready to elect a woman. Now she was likes the idea of a woman being president, but she is, I think, correctly assessing her New Hampshire compatriots by saying that she doesn't think the country's ready for a woman. Because I got to tell you, I don't think I would have said this before this cycle. I think I would have said, you know what? Actually, I think the first woman president is probably going to be a Republican. And I'm not sure I think that anymore. And I also talked about this with Ann Selzer a little bit last week, but just, it's almost like because Trump has given permission for people to be, and just to say whatever, that maybe people are being more honest, like that they would have not said this stuff out loud before. They're certainly saying it out loud. I've heard it so much about Nikki Haley from the 2-time Trump voters.
Well, good news. This is like the whole Haley thing, the whole frustrating thing about all this, because look, anybody, you can overstate any problem, right? And that's true about sexism, it's true about everything. But like Nikki, goes out there. I remember I'm at CPAC and she's on stage going, the Democrats say we're a sexist party, and like, we're not a sexist party. And then you hear like somebody yell, "Shut up, C word." You know what I mean? Like in the crowd. It's like, there is like and she tweeted this week or said, I forget, about how America is not a racist country, has never been a racist country.
Never been.
Interviewed, never been a racist country. You know, it's
never
just
is
like,
tough. Never goes back a long time.
never is tough, but even present day,
Yeah.
it's tough on if you're kind of actually listening to the people.
All right, I don't want to get out of here without letting people hear some of this Christie sound, because it was funny to me how like in the tank these guys were for Christie, and I wonder how much Christie. I assume he realizes that the people who really liked him, like his 15%, were basically coming from Democrats, like people who liked hearing him blow up Trump. So let's listen to them talk about Christie.
Chris Christie, he speaks the truth. He's not going to win, but he's getting the message across, and he's not a coward. The rest of them are cowards. They're totally afraid of this RICO criminal. And, you know, they say they pardoned him. I'm very familiar with DeSantis. It's ridiculous. He tells it like it is. He was a good prosecutor. He did put Jared Kushner's father away, which shows the family tree there. If I go into the primary, it would definitely be for him.
I'm with Christie, too. I think he stands up. He sees it like it is. I think he's got a pretty good track record. I think he'd do well. Do I think he's going to win? Probably not, but you can always hope. And it is an absolute vote against Trump.
It seems to me like the Republican Party and the Democrat Party have switched. And the Republican Party wants government to tell me everything and control me. And the Democrat Party is saying live and let live. So I'm afraid to vote for any of them at this point, except I think Christie would let us be. I think he's, you know, the old-fashioned Republican.
So that last woman talked about live and let live. And New Hampshire, generally kind of a live and let live kind of place.
Live free or die.
Like live free or die. Yeah. And so, you know, they want to vote. This is the thing though. I love what she said about Republicans used to be the live and let live people. And now they're the ones that want to tell you what to do. And Democrats are the ones who think, you know, you should be able to live and let live, which to me, that strikes me as about right.
Yeah, I think probably during COVID, maybe some people would have some pushback on that, but you know,
that's
all new.
That's true.
It's
there was some anti-Anunu sentiment around how he handled the pandemic.
Republicans were more live and let die during COVID.
Yeah,
you know, so a little different. But I don't know if Christie realizes. I assume he has to, because you meet all the people that come to your events, right?
Yeah.
They talk to you afterwards. It's easy to figure out. You know, I know it was a warning sign for me from Haley when I was there for the circus, like in October when her little surge was starting. I went to one of our events, and several people recognized me. And I was like, not a good sign for you, Nikki. These are the types of people that are showing up to your events, right?
That watch a lot of MSNBC.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I wasn't getting clocked at the Ron DeSantis events or the Vivek. Nobody clocked me at the Vivek event in Crawford County, Iowa. I can tell you that. And so, you know, I think that is part of this realignment. A lot of people get frustrated. I'm like, oh, well, Chris Christie's a Democrat now. Or when JVL says that, it's like, well, he still has conservative beliefs. And it's like, well, yeah. The nature of the parties have changed, right? And so maybe it means that Chris Christie is an independent now that has more appeal to Democratic voters, right? But it's just like there are a lot more people that are kind of in the mold of the type of governor Chris Christie was, you know, that now choose to vote for Democrats. And so like that, and I think the woman at the very end of that clip kind of summarized that well.
Yeah. So it's funny, all of the people in this group would stick with Biden in a general election between a Trump-Biden rematch. And they'd all vote for Biden over Haley, too, because as one person said, I don't want Trump pardoned. But about half the group would have voted for Christie over Biden. Do you think if Nikki, if she were to somehow win, do you think she'd put New Hampshire in the general election contention? Do you buy the Nikki Haley head-to-head polling that she would crush Biden by 17 points?
No, because the people from your two-time Trump group, some of them would go down the other way, and then there'd be some partisanship that would be happening. People would become a lot of voters who say they're for Nikki Haley in the middle right now would be educated about her abortion position that don't know, like people in this group really knew. I think that there are probably versions of women like those in this group who live in Illinois or who live in Ohio or whatever that would say right now they're for Haley, and then the ads would start about how she is for a 6-week abortion ban. So I think that she would struggle with that. I thought it was interesting. The people that said that they'd vote for Christie, at least one person over Biden, was because of Kamala. So that has kind of sunk in a little bit. So that she was like, I like Biden better than Christie, but I worry about that Biden would die, and I like Christie better. She didn't maybe say that explicitly, but it was very clear that was the point that she was trying to make. So I don't know. I think that the map is different with Nikki, obviously, than Trump, but I don't think that it extends to somewhere like New Hampshire.
All right, just before we get out of here, I'm going to give you a chance to talk about Chris Anunu, just a smidge, because good old Governor Sununu, these voters like it in both the groups. The voters like Sununu. And obviously, I think Nikki Haley felt glad to get his endorsement. They all liked how Sununu appears on Boston sports radio. They find him to be a regular guy. But Chris Sununu, he's on my bad list. Because he keeps being asked whether or not he would vote for Trump and support Trump if Trump's the nominee. And he's starting to do this thing where he's like, why do you keep asking me that? Obviously, I would support him. He's the Republican, and we can't live under Biden's disastrous policies. Do you want to have the last word on Sununu, or do you want me to rant?
I'd like to hear your rant, so we can just do both. I'll be brief. My thing is, I get that. I would probably like Sununu if he was my governor. Governors are different, right? I don't have any huge. I don't know everything that he's done as governor. I'm sure I'd have some complaints, but I think that he's probably been a perfectly good governor. What he's bad at is being a Republican pundit, about the Republican Party, because he projects his wishes and his desires onto reality. And we need, more than anything, we need people like Chris Anunu speaking truth about what is happening. And expressing his frustrations rather than, I don't know, whatever this kind of gamesmanship that he's playing. And so that's the thing that, Chris Sununu, governor, seems fine to me. Chris Sununu, CNN pundit, I find very bad. I was trying to think about the right word there.
So my problem is the conflation of the two, right? So I agree with you. He makes a bad pundit, which is why he says Trump's never going to win the nomination. Here's another guy who the number of anti pundits, people who want to stay on the Republican side but don't like Trump, like Sununu, they have no fundamental understanding of Republican voters. They just don't, or they'd realize that actually, of course Trump can win the nomination. But that's not what bothers me about Sununu. I agree with you. I love me some moderate, Dem state governors, Republican governors. Those are my sweet spot. Hogan, Sununu. But when normal Republicans like Sununu, who clearly don't like Trump, endorse him, and probably Nikki Haley when she eventually just breaks my heart and endorses Trump after she drops out of this race, that is the worst possible thing that can happen, because they create a permission structure for normal voters who also don't like Trump and also think things are wrong with them to be like, well, you can't vote for those Democrats. Joe Biden's a disaster. And I take it on faith, because normal Republicans that are old school that I still like Chris Anunu and Nikki Haley, tell me it's okay. They're going to endorse him. And I'm not sure that there's anything more dangerous than when the normies see fit to build that permission structure.
Amen, sister. Amen. I got nothing to add to that. Amen, chorus. I'll have plenty more rants to that. Each time one of them endorses Trump officially, we can reprise this. I'll get angrier and angrier as the summer goes on.
Yeah, I think so both of us will. All right, man. I really appreciate you coming on, doing New Hampshire. You're the best. And thanks to all of you for listening to another episode of the Focus Group podcast. Go rate and review and help people find us on Apple iTunes. Because Tim's on, everybody's going to go and be like, Tim's my favorite. But this is my show.
Bring Tim back more. That's a great comment when you're rating and reviewing. More Tim.
All right. Thanks, buddy.